No one forgets where they were the night the seas seemed to hold their breath. The sky had sunk into a bruised shade of black, the wind moved without direction like a lost soul, and the ocean trembled with a quiet anger that left even seasoned sailors unable to explain the unease crawling beneath their skin. It was on that kind of night, when nature itself felt wounded, that whispers began spreading through the ports faster than the tide that dragged ships into their graves. Whispers of a stronghold floating somewhere deep within the militarized zone of the Redwater expanse. A fortress built not to protect a nation but to imprison something the world wasn't ready to face. They called it Tide Rock Fortress, though sailors used other names when rum filled their courage and shadows filled their memory. Some called it the Steel Abyss. Others called it the Grave of Ambition. And all of them warned that no pirate, no privateer, no mercenary crew had ever attempted to raid it. The warnings were not born from fear but from observation. Those who sailed too close never returned, and those who drifted within sight of its walls were often found weeks later, floating on shattered decks, their minds torn apart by something they could not explain. Yet it was on that heavy night that Captain Riven Hale, a man defined not by victory but by scars, listened to the whispers without dismissing them. He knew the stories. He knew the warnings. But he also knew something the others didn't: Tide Rock Fortress had swallowed his brother whole. And a man does not let blood vanish into silence without making the sea answer for it. Riven had built his reputation on brutality delivered with precision, on decisions others would hesitate to consider, and on a loyalty so fierce that men followed him even when logic abandoned them. His crew, one forged in the crucible of violence and survival, carried their wounds like banners. Zara Flintlock, whose rifle had ended wars before they began, moved like a phantom through battles. Cade Mercer, whose mind was sharper than any blade, understood machinery the way a priest understood scripture. And Drax Morrow, a towering brute carved from hardship, had killed more men with his bare hands than with weapons. They were not good people. They were not heroes. They were survivors, mean, relentless, and capable of darkness that the ocean itself envied. Yet even they hesitated when Riven told them what he intended. Not because they feared the fortress, but because they feared the weight behind Riven's voice. A weight shaped like grief. A weight shaped like vengeance. A weight shaped like a man who had nothing left to lose. The heist he proposed was not just impossible. It was suicidal. But so was telling Captain Riven Hale no. The war room aboard the Iron Viper carried a suffocating silence as the crew gathered around the weathered table scarred by years of violence. Maps lay scattered across it like bodies on a battlefield, circles marking patrol routes, red lines showing supply paths, and several sketches representing the defenses of Tide Rock Fortress. Riven stood at the head of the table, hands gripping the edges until his knuckles whitened. His crew watched him with an unease that felt foreign to them. They were used to violence, chaos, recklessness. But they had never seen their captain look tired. Not physically, but deep in the soul. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the heaviness of a man who had spent too many nights awake. He told them what he had learned from a deserter dying of infection on the docks of Varan Bay. A man whose last words had been a confession carved out of regret and agony. He had spoken of an artifact hidden deep within the fortress, something so powerful that the ocean's own currents bent around it. They called it the Seraph Engine, a relic pulled from ruins buried beneath the sea floor. The Navy wanted to harness it. Scientists wanted to study it. Commanders wanted to weaponize it. But the artifact itself refused to be understood. And Riven's brother, Elias Hale, had been part of the team assigned to study it before he vanished without explanation. Riven relayed every detail slowly, controlling his voice to mask the tremor that threatened to escape. Elias's final message had come through a broken transmitter stored in the ship's hold, a message filled with urgency, fear, and something else Riven refused to name. His brother had warned that the Seraph engine was unstable, that the fortress was built not just to guard it but to contain it. Removing it could rupture something ancient in the ocean floor. Something that had slept for longer than humanity had existed. The message ended abruptly, swallowed by static and a sound that resembled a scream choked by water. Zara leaned forward, her face hardened but her eyes softening just slightly. She had fought long enough beside Riven to understand what he was refusing to say out loud. Elias was not dead. At least, not yet. And Riven was willing to burn the world to confirm it. Cade's mind raced through the logistics, calculating probabilities, weaknesses, entry points, and escape routes. Every answer his brain supplied ended with failure. Drax cracked his knuckles and asked only one question: when do they leave? The moment sealed their fate. A crew that feared nothing had agreed to challenge the sea itself. And the sea, insulted by such audacity, prepared its wrath. The Iron Viper advanced into waters no pirate crew willingly entered. The air hung thick as though saturated with dread, clouds gathering into swirling masses that bled streaks of lightning into the churning horizon. Rain hammered the ship with relentless force, but Riven refused to slow course. He stood at the helm drenched and unblinking, his eyes locked on a point through the storm that only he could see. Drax gripped the rail with enough force to snap wood while Zara moved across the deck like a ghost, checking and rechecking her weaponry. Cade kept his eyes glued to the flickering displays inside the cabin, each reading twisting unnaturally as though the fortress distorted the very signals around them. When the outline of Tiderock Fortress finally materialized through the storm, it looked less like a man-made construct and more like a wound carved into the ocean. It towered with unforgiving steel, sharp angles, and lights that flickered like dying stars. Warships circled it like vultures waiting for the sea's next offering. Beneath the waves, sensors and automated drones moved with predatory precision. Even in the roar of the storm, the fortress radiated silence, an unnatural void that pressed into their skulls like invisible fingers. Riven activated the cloaking field, a stolen device that bent light and sound around the ship. The moment the field engaged, the storm's noise deadened slightly, adding another layer of eerie stillness to the world. They drifted in the shadow of the fortress like a specter. Zara steadied her breath and muttered that the storm itself seemed to be trying to warn them away. Riven did not disagree, but he did not relent. Instead, he whispered his brother's name like a curse the sea dared not swallow. They reached an exhaust channel beneath the fortress where heat radiated from steel walls like the breath of a caged beast. Drax fired grappling hooks into the structure, each one embedding deep with a metallic groan that vibrated through the storm. They climbed with grim determination, every motion heavy with purpose. As they slipped inside, the storm behind them crashed with renewed fury, lightning splitting the sky in violent streaks as though the heavens themselves mourned what the crew would soon become. Inside the fortress, metal corridors stretched endlessly with harsh lighting flickering like dying embers. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of oil, machinery, and something faintly metallic that reminded them all of blood. The deeper they moved, the heavier the atmosphere became, as though gravity itself pressed down to discourage their presence. Cade dismantled security locks without hesitation, his fingers moving with frantic precision. Zara guarded each intersection, her eyes sharp enough to catch the slightest flicker of movement. Drax carried the weight of potential violence in his stance, every muscle primed to unleash destruction the moment it was needed. Riven kept his pace steady, though inside, a storm raged darker than the one outside. He had imagined rescuing his brother 1,000 times, but he had never imagined facing the truth of what Elias had become. The closer they approached the vault, the more Riven sensed that the heist was not about treasure or revenge anymore. It was an unraveling of something buried deeper than steel. A sudden tremor shook the corridor, followed by red lights bleeding into the hallways. Zara cursed under her breath as alarms echoed through the fortress with piercing shrieks. Cade muttered that the cloaking field had shorted out the moment they crossed a threshold protected by technology he didn't recognize. Soldiers thundered through adjacent corridors, boots striking metal like war drums. Riven didn't hesitate, he gave the order to push forward. The vault chamber was close. They had no time to retreat. They reached the massive door carved with symbols that had no place in modern engineering. Cade's breath hitched as his hands traced the inscriptions. If he had time, he would have studied them for hours, but the fortress gave them seconds. He hacked the system, overloaded circuits, and bypassed failsafes with the desperation of a man defying his own mortality. When the vault door groaned open, the air changed instantly. It dropped into a cold so sharp it felt like knives against their skin. And there, suspended in a halo of shimmering light, was the Seraph engine. It pulsed gently, almost mesmerically, like a beating heart caged in light. Zara flinched as the artifact seemed to ripple through her vision. Drax took a step back, instinct warning him that the artifact wasn't meant to be witnessed by mortals. Riven stared at it, breath arrested, as shadows of memories flooded him. Elias's smile. His laughter. And his final message, trembling and cut short. Riven's fingers twitched toward the artifact, drawn by something neither he nor the fortress understood. The moment his skin grazed the energy field, pain ripped through him like molten metal searing bone. The field recoiled as if rejecting him. Then the room shuddered as a projection burst to life beside the artifact, forming the image of Elias Hale. Only he was thinner, fragmented, his eyes hollow yet burning with impossible clarity. Riven staggered backward as his brother's voice filled the chamber. Elias begged him to stop. He warned that the Seraph engine was not a treasure but a lock keeping something older than mankind sealed beneath the ocean. He explained that his consciousness had been absorbed by the artifact when the research went wrong, leaving his body behind while his mind continued fighting to maintain control. If the artifact was removed, the lock would fail. The sea floor would rip open. And the world would drown. The message ended with a tremor that shook the chamber violently. Moments later, soldiers burst into the vault with weapons raised. The real fight had begun. Gunfire erupted, turning the vault into a scene of chaos painted with smoke and blood. Zara dropped soldiers with surgical precision, each shot ripping through armor before the enemy even registered her presence. Drax tore through the advancing front line like a force of nature, smashing armor, bone, and steel as though vengeance itself guided his fists. Riven fought with a burn in his chest deeper than anger. Every enemy he brought down carried the weight of the unanswered scream that had ended his brother's message. Cade darted between consoles, desperately stabilizing the artifact's containment field as surges of unstable energy cracked through the room. One soldier managed to strike Riven with the butt of a rifle, sending him crashing against the vault wall. Pain exploded across his vision, but he fought through it, slamming his blade into the man's throat with brutal finality. The soldier gurgled and collapsed. Riven staggered forward, wiping blood from his mouth as he joined his crew again. The fortress groaned around them as if reacting to the violence within. Pipes burst overhead, steam screaming like wounded metal. The alarms blared in twisted distortion, no longer rhythmic but erratic. Something had destabilized the entire structure. The crew fled the vault as reinforcements flooded the corridor. They pushed through hallways bathed in red light, each step punctuated with gunfire and explosions. Drax ripped open a sealed door with raw strength. Zara shot through 3 helmets in a single fluid motion. Cade hacked the mainframe mid-run, rerouting automated turrets to fire on their own soldiers. Riven led the charge, his movements sharp and furious, driven by something between grief and fury. As they climbed into the upper level, a missile detonated behind them, hurling Zara into a wall. Riven dragged her up by the vest, refusing to lose another person he cared for. The fortress continued to crumble, and the artifact pulsed violently from the chamber below. Chapter 6, The Ocean Demands a Price. As they neared the extraction point, the fortress commander appeared, flanked by a squad of elite soldiers. His voice boomed with unyielding authority as he ordered them to surrender. He claimed the artifact was the only thing preventing the ocean from releasing something catastrophic. His eyes carried no hesitation, no doubt. Whatever lay beneath the sea was far more terrifying than any army. Riven locked eyes with him and saw the truth. For the first time since entering the fortress, he felt something colder than grief. He felt fear. Cade whispered that the containment readings had skyrocketed. The artifact was losing control. Elias's warning had not been an exaggeration. If they didn't leave now, none of them would see the sunrise. Riven didn't hesitate. He threw a smoke charge, and the crew burst through the chaos with everything they had left. They reached the external platform and leapt into the raging sea, the cold water slicing against their skin like shattered glass. The Iron Viper surfaced as though summoned, engines roaring with desperate urgency. Drax hauled everyone aboard, water streaming off them as the ship tore away from the fortress. Behind them, Tiderock Fortress groaned as its lower chambers convulsed under the unstable artifact. The ocean churned violently, forming whirlpools that threatened to swallow the entire stronghold. Yet somehow, the artifact's field stabilized just enough to keep the fortress from collapsing entirely. The world wasn't saved, but it wasn't destroyed either. The crew had succeeded in escaping, but not in extinguishing the shadows they had awakened. The Iron Viper drifted across calmer waters as dawn broke reluctantly across the horizon. Blood, bruises, and exhaustion clung to the crew like frost. Zara sat with her rifle across her knees, her breath shaky but steadying. Cade stared blankly at the console, replaying the calculations of everything that had gone wrong and everything that could still go wrong. Drax leaned against the rail, staring at the sea with an expression uncharacteristically hollow. Riven stood at the bow as the light touched the world, the wind chilling him in ways the ocean never had. He replayed Elias's fragmented face, the tremor in his voice, the truth he had uncovered. His brother was alive, but not living. Preserved, trapped, and losing himself piece by piece to keep the world safe from something ancient and unfathomable. For Riven, victory felt indistinguishable from defeat. The heist no pirate crew had attempted before had given them no gold, no glory, no renown. It had given them horror, loss, and a truth carved deep into their bones. Yet it had also given Riven something more valuable than treasure. It had given him purpose. The fortress would not endure forever. The artifact would not remain stable indefinitely. And the ocean was a patient predator. Riven knew the world still sat on the edge of a blade. He knew his brother's consciousness flickered within that artifact, fighting a battle no man should face alone. And he knew that the pirate task force would one day return to that fortress. Not to steal. Not to fight. But to end the war before it began. Chapter 8, The Ocean Never Forgets. In the following days, the crew licked their wounds and repaired their battered ship. Silence clung to them like damp air as each member wrestled with the ghosts of what they had seen. Their bodies healed, but their minds remained scarred with the truth of the ocean's hidden horrors. Riven spent hours alone at the bow, staring at the shifting horizon as though expecting it to split open. His thoughts tormented him in endless loops of memories, guilt, and questions without answers. If Elias was alive within the artifact, was he suffering? Did he hate Riven for abandoning him? Or had he used his final strength to protect the world and his brother at once? These questions gnawed at him, sharper and deeper than any blade ever had. The crew gathered one evening as the sun drowned itself in the horizon. Zara broke the silence by reminding Riven that Elias's message had not been one of despair but one of warning. He had tried to protect them. Cade added that he believed Elias had intentionally triggered the holographic message when he sensed their presence. Drax, usually slow with words, simply said that no man trapped in a machine deserved to remain there. Riven realized then that his crew had not followed him into the fortress because of loyalty alone. They had followed him because they believed in him. And they would follow him still. The heist had not ended. It had merely exposed the beginning of something far larger. As days turned into weeks, rumors began spreading across every coast. Some said a fortress had shaken the sea itself. Others claimed an artifact had awakened deep wounds in the ocean floor. A few dared whisper that a pirate crew had survived an impossible mission and escaped a place where even the Navy tread carefully. The legends grew, burdened with exaggeration and twisted truths. But Riven ignored the rumors. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon because he understood what the others could not. They had not stolen the Seraph engine. They had not defeated Tide Rock Fortress. They had not uncovered the full truth of what slept beneath the sea. They had merely pulled aside the curtain covering a nightmare capable of swallowing humanity whole. One night, under a moon carved thin as a blade, Riven gathered his crew and told them the truth he had been avoiding. They would return to the fortress one day. Not to fight for treasure, but to fight for the world. And to save the last piece of Elias that remained. His voice trembled only once, as he admitted that the world may hate them for what they would have to do, that the Navy would hunt them, that the ocean itself would rise against them. But his crew simply nodded, accepting their fate with the grim resolve of those who had already crossed the threshold of death and returned. The Iron Viper sailed onward, leaving a trail that the sea swallowed greedily. The world slept blindly, unaware of the storm looming beneath its waves. And Riven Hale, a man carved from loss and vengeance, stood ready to face whatever monstrosity waited in the deep. The heist no pirate crew had attempted before had not made them legends. It had made them witnesses. Witnesses to a truth that demanded blood, loyalty, and sacrifice. Witnesses to the beginning of a war the world was not prepared to fight. And as the ocean murmured in its eternal restlessness, the pirate task force moved through its waters with a purpose that no storm could break. For the sea may forget the men who sail upon it, but it would never forget the night Riven Hale defied it. And it would never forgive what was coming.